Okay, here you go. Rugged Mercy, a country doctor in Idaho's Sun Valley. As you know, it's a biography of my grandfather, a turn-of-the-century country doctor in Idaho. And there's a preface to the book, but I'm going to save that until the end. It'll make more sense anyway after all these stories are told. There's a collection of stories that my grandmother told me. Tales of love, compassion, struggles against seemingly impossible odds, power, feminine power, believe it or not. It starts out in 1894, Chapter 1, The First Victory, Haley, Idaho. Haley back then was barely 10 years earlier. It was nothing more than a trapper's trail. Two children strained high on a bench and peered through the window. They knew there was something going on in there. They were up early out fishing, and there's this little log cabin, and you just feel that there was something going on in there. So they put a bench up by the window, and they strained high, peered in, and shivered at the sight within. A young child lay upon a pedestal draped in a shroud of white, encircled by 15 to 20 coal oil lanterns. Above her stood a man holding a dagger dripping with blood. With it, he was cutting out the child's entrails, and under each stroke the shroud grew more crimson. Shadows of the deed flitted against the rough-timbered walls and brought to mind a tale of terror. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. There to guard the ritual was Sheriff Charlie Fury, back against the wall, 6 shooters strapped low to his hips. The man with the dagger lifted his head and looked at the window, looked right at the children, meeting their eyes. There, at the window, he thundered. The bench tipped to the ground beneath them and tumbled away. Before they could recover, a heavy grip tugged at their collars. The chilly pre-dawn sky silhouetted a looming figure whose voice boomed. I'm Sheriff Charlie Fury of Alturas County. Now you kids are going to have to answer to me. Warm urine ran down the older child's leg. The sheriff hovered above them, looking down. The handles of the 6 shooters poked out the sides of his suit coat. The coat was buttoned high up at his neck and hung loose at his knees. It made the tall man seem all the larger. His long mustache twitched. You hombres here to rob these good folks? He drove his evil stare at the older child, a boy about 11 or 12. You there. You Billy the Kid? Is that who you are? Huh, boy? No, sir, squeaked the boy. You here to rob these people, huh? Is that it? No, sir. Charlie Fury then fixed his eyes on the second child. Both children wore oversized trousers held up by suspenders, but this child had strawberry hair that tumbled down the middle of her back. How about you, little missy? No, sir. 'Cause if you are, 'cause if that's why you're here, I know right straight away what I'm going to do with you two. The children shook their heads in denial again. Charlie Fury said, What do you kids think you're doing anyway, coming here like this, sneaking around? Why, you're lucky you didn't get your fool head stove in. He looked at the boy once more. You boy, what's your name? Robert? Robert who? Robert Wright? Charlie Fury looked surprised, then twisted up his mouth in a mocking expression of disbelief. No, not R.H. Wright's son. Tell me that ain't so. Yes, sir, acknowledged the boy shamefully. R.H. Wright, the stock grower? Yes, sir. I know your daddy, boy. He's not going to be happy about this. No, sirree, not at all. No, sir. You know, your daddy came here in 81 during the gold fever. Friedman's store, why, it weren't no more than a tent. Came here, your daddy, because he wanted a better life for you and those brothers and sisters of yours. He worked them any more before water filled her shaft. He worked up some savings, and he went out and bought himself some livestock. Settled on that piece down by Bellevue. He did it for you, boy. You and those brothers and sisters of yours. Charlie shook his head again, twice, before speaking. No, sir. He's not going to be happy about this. No, sir, that's for sure. Charlie looked then at the other child, a girl, fixing that awful stare on her, twitching his mustache. And you, girl, what's your name? Cynthia Beamer, sir. She looked down at the ground, shrinking from the stare. Charlie Fury stepped forward, making 2 loud thumps. Yeah? You Cynthia Beamer? Little Dottie Beamer? He was looking straight down from the sky. She started to cry. A woman's tears mean nothing to me, young lady. Now, what I want to know is, I want to know who your pa is. I suppose next thing you'll be telling me is that your pa is Al Beamer, Union Pacific Station agent. Look at me, young lady, when I'm a-talking at you. The child stretched her neck back. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What? Yes, sir, Al Beamer. He's my pa, sir. Charlie clicked his teeth, turned his head, and spat. The children jerked. Another good man. Works himself silly for you kids, for your brother and that baby sister of yourn. Never seen a man who could work a telegraph key like your pa. Why, you can talk on that thing faster than most people can speak. Respected man around these parts. And I find his daughter chasing around with the likes of an hombre like Billy the Kid. I ain't Billy the Kid, sir, the boy said. I'm Robert Wright. So you say. Charlie spat again. Lucky thing I lost the keys, or I'd be throwing you two in the who's cow, locking you up good and tight's what I'd be doing. The children turned their eyes down toward the ground once more, toward Charlie's big boots. A voice bellowed from inside the house. Bring the children to me, quickly. The man with the dagger. Charlie grabbed them, a hand behind each neck, and dragged them, squirming and kicking, to the back door. The door was heavy, made of logs hewn in half. It scraped across the rock-hard dirt floor. As Charlie kicked it open with the toe of his heavy boot, a stench permeated the room, scathing to the throat. The pedestal upon which the child lay was in reality a large dining room table with exquisitely carved legs. The man with the dagger was wrist-deep in the girl's abdominal cavity, like he was holding her together with something. I need more light. He nodded toward the children, hanging from Charlie's hands like coats on hangers. And you two are going to help me get it. He directed the children and Sheriff Fury to hold the lanterns high, and another person, a man, was asked to hold a mirror to reflect the light down. Then he spoke to a woman in the room. Mrs. Thompson, he said, you will help me. He continued muttering his instructions. He told Mrs. Thompson to use strips of towels and soak up the blood. Don't be afraid, he said. That's it. Keep it all soaked up there so's I can see what I'm doing in here. The man was chewing on the stub of an unlit cigar, his face dirty with a heavy growth of whiskers, maybe 2 days' worth. Dip that mirror just a mite more. There we go. Just like that. Now, let's see what we can find in here. Both his hands were swishing around the transparently pink mounds of tiny intestines and the nodules. He's a-hidin'. The man reached behind something along the back intestinal wall, an organ about the size of an orange, and pulled out what he was looking for, the tit end of one of the intestines. There he is. Come to Papa. That's it. It was about the size of a little finger, black and swollen. He grabbed it with pliers, funny-looking pliers, bent at the handles. We need to tie this jigger off. There was a thump on the hard dirt floor. Mrs. Thompson had fainted dead away. The man with the dagger seemed more annoyed than concerned. She will be fine. You needn't worry about her. Clenching his teeth tighter on the cigar, he looked at the man holding the mirror and said, half with a grin, Go over here and take up your wife's place, over here, and start soaking up the blood. It's flowing a mite heavier than I expected it to be. Doesn't mean anything. I just need it swabbed so as I can see. But wash up first. Mr. Thompson didn't move. All that happened was that droplets of sweat beaded up on his upper lip. He shook his head as if to plead for another way, because he couldn't force his arms to move or even compel his voice to utter a response. The man with the dagger looked at Sheriff Fury. The tough lawman turned pale and quickly shook his head. No, Doc, no, not me. The doctor bit on the cigar and tipped his head forward and aimed his eyes at young Robert, almost as if it amused him to do so. Looks like it's up to you, boy. How about it, son? You want to step up to the challenge, help me save this wee child's life? Tell you something, if you do, it'll be something you'll not soon forget. Guarantee you that. It'll be something that will change your life. Robert stared back at the doctor, reluctant to believe what he was being asked to do. What do you say? I could sure use 4 hands right about now. The good Lord only made me with 2. Robert was shaking inside. The doctor's expression became more tender as he tipped his head forward in powerful reassurance. Robert put down the lantern and took 3 very slow steps forward. It's a lad. But I want you to do something first, though, before you go poking around in here. I want you to go over there to the stove. The doctor gestured toward the far corner of the single-room log home, and wash your hands. You'll notice that the water there has been set to boiling. Take that pitcher and scoop some up and pour it into the basin and scrub your hands. Scrub them good, all the way to the elbow. Don't dawdle about it. Go, 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 go. Hup now. Robert did as he was told. Took steady, cautious steps over to the cook stove in the corner, dipped out some of the boiling water, washed, then took his place by the side of the doctor. Yes, he did, his hands red and prickling from the sting of the lye soap. As he looked down into the child's abdominal cavity, he realized that that was where the stench was coming from. The awful smell rolled up and hit him in the face like a slap. And when he sucked it down into his lungs, his throat tightened with a jerk. He stifled the urge to cough and stood his ground. He found it was bearable if he took shallower breaths. In one hand, the doctor was holding the still attached appendage with the odd-looking pliers. In the other, he was dabbing up the blood with strips of cloth. Quite simple, he said. The doctor said, all you have to do is take these strips and press them against the side of the incision. Soak up the blood. Here, just like this. Simple. Why, you couldn't make a mistake if you wanted to. It's as easy as falling off a log. And young Missy, his eyes went to Dottie, you bring that light a mite closer. That's a girl. Right there. Good. Good girl. Hold it right there. Don't move. Young Robert was still shaking inside, but his hands did what they were supposed to do. And upon his face was frightened wonderment. He did his job superbly. He kept the area clean and visible for the doctor to make his ligations on the appendage and cut between them. 2 ties about 1/4 of an inch apart, tight, so that the bowel contents wouldn't spill and infect the abdominal cavity. The whole thing was over in a matter of minutes. The doctor rolled a cigar stub in his teeth and a gritty smile of satisfaction. Not bad, he said. Not bad at all. Halstead himself couldn't do as good. He looked at Mr. Thompson. Your little girl will wake up soon. She will be fine. But I want her in bed for 2 weeks, okay? Too much strain could tear the incision. Mrs. Thompson, conscious now and on her feet, drew in a husky breath, as if she'd been holding it the entire time. Color flushed her face, and she began to cry. The relief was overwhelming. The doctor stitched and closed and waited with the child while she recovered from the anesthesia. Then Robert and Dottie joined him in a hearty breakfast supplied by the Thompsons, bread, eggs, dried beef. When the 2 children walked out of that tiny log home with the doctor at mid-morning, things were different. A cool wind was blowing down from the North Mountains, tossing their hair, and it carried about it a certain scent, a crispness drawn up from the good earth by the melting overnight frost. It was the same wind that blew every morning at this time, but it seemed different, better. Things were charmed somehow, transformed. Colors were more vivid, things seemed more alive, and the 2 children felt just a little closer to one another, as if the deed had bonded them in some unexplainable way. Well, would you look at that, observed the doctor on the way home, shifting the reins to his other hand so he could point to the moon, still visible in a faint blue outline against the prominent span of Carbonate Mountain, a hanging there in heaven, refusing to go away, a hanging there like a silver bell. The children squinted as they looked. Carbonate's steep hillsides, dotted in cliffs and sparse sprouts of evergreens, lay ornate from the sun that had by now fully crested the rolling mountains on the other side and was high enough to pierce the entire valley. It seemed to drape her in a kind of a softness, and the ridges in a kind of clean softness that left the cloudless sky behind her almost white. The Indians had a name for it, E-da-ho, sun coming over the mountain, Idaho. The wagon was tall to the point of being top-heavy. It served as both home and office for the doctor as he meandered from town to town. The driver's seat was high up by the wagon's roof. The children, one on either side of him, leaned instinctively inward as he drove. They'd never been so high. A backpack containing their makeshift fishing gear, with a birchwood pole sticking out, was lashed onto the back, along with the doctor's pots and pans and a collection of high-backed chairs. Painted on the side were letters of silver and gold. The Kickapoo Sagawa Remedy Company, it said. Dr. Joseph I. Durham, proprietor. Surgery, dentistry, eclectic medicine, reasonable rates, fortunes told. Are you a for real doctor? Asked Dottie. Robert hushed her. Mind your manners. It's all right, son. It's quite all right. Yes, my dear. I am a for real doctor. Diploma from the Eclectic Medical College of Cincinnati, Ohio. Is that a long ways away? End of the world, child. End of the world. Robert was turning his head back to look at the three riders accompanying the doctor, clopping along in back of them. One was slumped down, half asleep on his horse, an Indian, the oldest-looking human being Robert thought he had ever seen. Long locks of dusty gray hair fell from beneath the wide brim of his hat, and his skin was pasty brown with white wrinkles. But the sight that kept drawing Robert's attention was the giant man riding the next horse, the likes of which he had never in his life seen, a real African chief. He seemed so tall his feet would have drugged the ground had he not been holding them up. His fist alone was the size of a normal man's head, and his skin was the color of a starless night, so black it seemed unnatural against the contrast of his billowing feathers and war paint. Next to him rode a stunningly attractive woman, also with black skin, whose knees and thighs now and then emerged from the sides of a grass skirt. "What's that kickapoo thing mean?" Dottie asked. "That thing that's written on your wagon." Dottie was young, but she could read, having been schooled by lantern light with the Holy Scriptures. Dr. Durham's chest swelled a bit. "The Kickapoo Sagawa Remedy Company, my young friend, happens to be the trademark of a company born of pure genius." He lifted a smoky bottle about the size of a palm of his hand. "The name is a reference to a miracle elixir. Contained herein is a concoction good for both body and soul." "What's in it?" "Ah, that is a secret. A potion from the darkest of Africa. I've taken it upon myself to assume the responsibility of offering it to the good people of the Wood River Gold Belt as a service, taking nothing for myself but a modest remuneration." Robert started to speak, to ask a question, but lapsed into a coughing fit. His throat still hurt. "From the chloroform vapors," offered Dr. Durham, half laughing. "Chloroform is what we use to put a patient to sleep before an operation. It reacts to the open flame of a lantern to produce some rather unpleasant fumes. A body gets used to it." "I thought it was coming out of the little girl." The doctor laughed fully and heartily. "No, child. No, you just happen to be in a place where you got a good whiff of it. It'll pass." Robert cleared his throat and began again. "What causes people to get sick?" Dr. Durham clicked the reins of his one-horse team and blew smoke above his head from his cigar. "What causes people to get sick? What do you think? The head mistress at school says it's demons. My pa says there's no such thing as demons." "Ah, the schoolmarm's right. Tiny buggers. You put 1,000 of them on the head of a pin." The doctor slapped the reins again. His suit coat lay across his lap, and his shirt, stained in blood spatters, was rolled up at the sleeves to expose oversized fuzzy forearms and short, fat fingers. The stub of his burning cigar was stuck between two of them. It seemed like he could barely hold it. Robert wondered how in the world he could operate with fingers like that. "Microbes, we call them. Demons, for sure. So small you can't nary see a one without the aid of a microscope. Even then, you can't see all of them. You only see the big ones." Dr. Durham tended to come across as a kidder, because of the way he always half smiled when he talked, so a person was never quite sure where the line was between a fact and a tale. Truth of it, Robert was a little that way himself. "Invisible demons," restated Dr. Durham. "Demons so small you can't see them." "If they're so small, how's come then you know they're there?" "Oh, they're there all right. Like I say, some of you can see with a microscope." Little Dottie had fallen asleep, head dropped against the doctor's shoulder. It must have happened quickly, because a minute ago she was wide awake. Dr. Durham stuffed out his cigar on the footboard and took his coat and carefully tucked it over her back and shoulders, then put his arm around her to keep her more secure. Mornings are chilly in Idaho, even in the heat of summer. "It wasn't too awfully long ago," he said, "that this fellow across the ocean concocted a notion that it was microbes that were causing patients to up and die before an operation. Some doctors believed him, some didn't. Fact was, the doctors who started washing and scrubbing before surgery, they started having fewer fatalities. So I figure, why take a chance? But I'll tell you something, I never had a problem, hardly ever lost a patient, ever. Even back before I started washing and disinfecting, because I got out fast. Your tissues open to the air for too long, they don't heal right, so you got to be in and out quick. If an incision is left open and exposed to the air for an extended period and coagulation occurs, when the wound is finally closed, the tissues are no longer in the best state for quick healing. Why, what takes those hospital doctors 2 hours to do, I'll complete in 15 minutes. Do a better job to boot. You should see the way they operate in big city hospitals. Looks like something out of a Middle Eastern harem. Surgeons wear gloves, masks, some of them. Sheets are draped everywhere, even on the surgeons, all in efforts to keep the patient and the wound clean from microbes. Those big shots back at Johns Hopkins, why, fiddle. I'll match my kitchen surgery skills against their highfalutin techniques any day, and I will have less tissue deterioration. What was it you did back there to the girl? Asked Robert. The removal of an inflamed variform appendix. Doctors have been doing this particular procedure for nigh on 10 years now. It's quite common. Weren't you scared? A surgeon can't afford to be scared. Let me tell you something, boy. If you want to be the best at something, you can't be scared. You've got to have a cares-be-damned attitude. That's the truth of it. You must care without caring. Something to remember if you ever become a doctor. Oh, not me. I'm going to run away and live a life of adventure. Oh, you don't say. When do you plan on doing this? Soon, I expect. First, I aim to go up into yonder hills and dig me a gold mine, get about $100 worth. Then I'll probably go hook up with Joe Snake and his river pirates for a spell. Then I'll join the circus, tame me some lions and tigers. Maybe I'll scout some for the army like Rube Robbins, spoke up Dottie from the drifting clouds of her sleep. Me? I'm going to be a very famous pianist. I shall perform at all the concert halls in Europe. Kings and queens will invite me to play before them. Robert said, maybe after I strike it rich and after I'm done scouting with the army, I'll come to Europe and see one of those concerts. That would be lovely, she said, speaking as though she truly expected it to be so, and dropped once again into the soundness of her sleep. Dottie plays for all the churches, you know, said Robert. She's the only one in town who can do it, except for the saloon players. What you kids did out there, it was really something special. What are you doing out here anyway so early in the morning? We came out to go fishing and look for beavers. Dottie ain't never seen a beaver. You both did a fine job in there. My brother Lester died when he was 2, said Robert. It was from diarrhea. Diarrhea? You probably mean diphtheria, also caused by microbes. Robert's little mind gathered the courage to revisit the time his baby brother died. Little Lester had a pumpkin-round face and wide, innocent eyes, trusting eyes. The elder Robert Wright thought himself worthy of that trust at first, convinced that what ailed his son was only a slight case of the consumption. He was sure that the cool rubs and the elixir would cause the cold to pass, but the pain grew within the child, and the crying became louder and more desperate. A parent can remove a sliver, bandage a cut, calm hysteria, but there are some things none alive can fix. No one can reach into a tiny chest and deliver air. Even the doctor could do nothing but sit by the child's bedside and watch, helpless. Diphtheria kills because a mucous membrane forms to slowly choke off air over a period of days. The doctor knows when the end is near because the child stops crying. All its energy must be directed to the task of breathing. Finally, after torturous hours, the child stiffens. The face turns blue. The eyes bulge out. The little body twitches, then goes limp. The doctor at his brother's bedside spoke, "The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away." It would have been better had he said nothing at all. It was the only time Robert had seen his father cry. "We've got an antitoxin for it now," Dr. Durham said. "What's an antitoxin?" "Poison. Poison for the demons. See what happens, the demons get inside a person and spit out poisons. We doctors call poisons toxins. So what we do, we give a person antitoxins. The antitoxins get rid of the toxins, sort of. It's a bit more complex than that, I expect, but basically that's what happens. Does it work? Appears it does. Word from back east is that it does. Dr. Durham still had the grin on his face, and Robert still wasn't sure if it was there because it was the way he was or because he was spinning a tale. "I'll be telling you the truth, young lad. I don't quite know myself how it works exactly, but I hear tell it does." "Is that why your tonic works? Is because it has those antitoxins in it?" He didn't answer. Well, what? How does your tonic work?" The doctor made motions with his jaw as if he was chewing on something. He was thinking. That's what he did when he was thinking. Well? Well, what? Well, how does it work? Dr. Durham scratched his hatless head on his sunburned bald spot. He'd hung his beat-up bowler on the end of the wagon's buggy whip and ran his fingers through gray tufts of hair that stuck straight out of his head. Never mind you, it doesn't always work, but it's sort of a secret. But when it does, I expect it's because... He leaned over and whispered it out of the side of his mouth. I expect it's because it goes to work on your mind. He tapped his head. In here, works on your brain, makes you think you're not going to be sick, fools you into getting better. The mind's a funny thing that way. Sometimes that's what you have to do. Sometimes you have to fool him into getting well. Oh. The answer satisfied young Robert, and with it he fell away into sleep, traveling in his mind to a different place, a different time, one in which he was a great surgeon, accomplishing many great things, helping many people.